Attention women's health professionals, the next round of FAM is just around the corner. Classes start on October 4th. FAM is the perfect program for busy women's health professionals who want to offer fertility awareness charting support in their practice. FAM cuts out all the fluff and only focuses on what you need to serve your clients better. Each module, homework assignment, in-class training, and chart review session is there for a reason. Where will you be 9 months from now? With a FAM certification, you'll have a brand new skill set that will allow you to use the menstrual cycle as a diagnostic tool and vital sign in your practice. Your confidence in analyzing and interpreting menstrual cycle charts will be at a level you can't even imagine today. And you'll have a brand new offering in your business that will allow you to reach more clients. This knowledge is truly life-changing. Transform your practice in 9 months. You won't regret it. Join us this October in FAM. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/FAMlive to apply today. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 490. Today I'm sharing another brand new episode in my FAM reality series. I'm sharing my interview with Alayna, who was also a member of my most recent Fertility Awareness Mastery Live group coaching program. And Alayna shares her experience on the pill. And I think there's so many really interesting pieces of her story. So I'll just share a couple things that I found particularly interesting. One is that Alayna's experience on the pill was actually relatively positive. She didn't have any significant side effects. She was happy on it for about 2 decades or so. So she was on it for quite a while and she was quite happy on it. And it's interesting because it really wasn't until the last few years that she took it that she really started to have some symptoms that she noticed and that she didn't like. But it did take her a while to connect some of those symptoms to the birth control pill. And the great thing about the reality series is that it allows you just to hear the experiences of these women in their own words. And I feel like it really does give a realistic representation of experiences on birth control, experiences coming off birth control. And it's nice to see, not everybody has the same type of experience on birth control. And not everybody has the same type of experience coming off birth control. It is nice to know what can happen. And so, for example, some women come off birth control and they just start ovulating again within 2 to 4 weeks. So they already get their first period within a month or so of coming off. And that's not to say that the cycle is entirely normal. There are certain things that we do see post-pill within that post-pill transition phase. Issues with mucus where it's not showing normal patterns, or temperatures reading a bit more erratically, or other symptoms that take a bit of time to normalize. So it's not to say that everything is just perfect in 2 weeks. That's not a thing at all. But there are some women who do start having their period pretty much right off the bat. And on the other hand, there's women who it takes a little bit longer, where they might, have their first period within about 2 months or 3 months. And then there's a smaller percentage of women who don't start menstruating again for quite some time. It's nice to hear the differences because, of course, if you're listening and you've been on the pill for quite some time, or whatever we define to be quite some time in the research, they define long-term typically as 2 or more years. So if you've been on the pill for 2 or more years, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years, obviously there's a lot of questions there. What's going to happen? How's my body going to respond? What's it going to be like when I come off the pill? How long is it going to take for my period to come back? And, what are my cycles going to be like? And all of those kinds of things. And so hopefully by listening to this series, you're getting a bit of a representation of what the different scenarios are, so that you can at least be more prepared for what you may expect when coming off. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump into today's interview with Alayna. And I'm excited to be here today with Alayna. Alayna was a member of our most recent Fertility Awareness Mastery Live group coaching program. So we stopped our program. It's been a few months now. So I feel like this is a really fun opportunity to check in at least, is it like 2 months out, maybe 2.5 months out?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. Well, we can start with my favorite question to ask in these episodes, which is, let us know when you had your first period, how old were you? And then take us through what your cycles were like and if you've used birth control before, and what led you to actually jump in and use fertility awareness.
Yeah, so I feel like I specifically remember my first period because it was in middle school. It was like at school is when it started, of course. So it was like all the freak out happened in the middle school bathroom. But I believe I was 12. I can't remember exactly, but it was either like 12 or 13. And I had one of my best friends was in the bathroom with me, and I was like, oh my gosh, it happened. Do you have anything? And luckily they ran and told the teacher. It was a whole day. I'm pretty sure my mom picked me up from school that day, and we had to go to CVS to get pads, and it was a whole thing. But I don't really remember, much of like the early periods in like middle school transitioning into high school. So I guess that's a good thing. It was never like super awful, I don't remember, until I got to high school. I think it was like freshman or sophomore year of high school, ninth or 10th grade, where I did start getting really bad cramps. And that was the reason that I ended up going on birth control when I was like 15, I believe. And they said, oh, the pill will likely make the cramps a lot better, and it will keep you on a regular cycle pattern. And that was pretty much it. I didn't, get a lot of explanation. And my mom, I think, had been on the pill for a long time too when she was younger. So it was just a normal thing. Like there wasn't much conversation about it. And so since then, I'm now 31 and just came off the pill when we started our class back in May. And so that's, 16 years of just constantly being on the pill. Like I never took a break from it. I never really felt like I needed to until this year, until now. So I really didn't have any of like at least that I remember or that I, connected to the issues. It was fine. I was taking it every day. It was such a routine for 16 years. And, towards probably, I think it was during college or right after college, my periods were still like, I was still cramping a lot. And so at one point during college, my OBGYN said, well, you can just not have it. Like you can just keep taking the pills and not do the sugar pills and have that withdrawal bleed. So I did that for quite a while, where I just wasn't having a period as well, where I think I maybe went like a whole year without having a period, like just constantly taking the birth control pills. But I was having like some infections and some other just like weird cramps when I wasn't bleeding or anything. And so when I went back to the OB that time and was telling her that, she was like, well, maybe just have one every 3 or 4, 5 or 6 months, just to see if you have that withdrawal bleed, it might fix all the issues you're having. So I did that. So after that, like appointment, I went ahead and had my period that next time, or the withdrawal bleed that next time. And it was awful. It was, I don't know if it was just my body like freaking out because I hadn't bled in so long, but it was a bad one. I kept telling myself, it's just because I haven't bled and haven't cramped for this long. It like held it all up, and then there it goes in that one withdrawal bleed. But it did subside some of the random, cramps and like spotting issues that I was having. And yeah, so since that time, I started doing like 3 months where I wouldn't have one, then I'd have one. So I was having, 3 to 4 withdrawal bleeds a year for probably the last like 5 or 6 years. Yeah. And then I guess the thing that like made me start to question the pill was I was feeling really lethargic. I was having like, I don't know, I guess health issues where I kept having no energy and yeast infections and like zero libido and just lots of random little things that started adding up. Like it wasn't anything major, but I think I found someone on Instagram. It was maybe Dr. Brighton or you or like a group, like multiple people that were talking about issues with the pill. And I was like, wow, like all these things like sound like the issues I'm having. And I never would have even thought, oh, the pill could be causing that. And so I got Dr. Brighton's book. I got your book. I started listening to all the podcasts, and I was like, wow, okay, if this is causing these issues I'm having, like, what is it going to hurt for me to come off of it and see if this could actually be the solution? Coming off of it could be the solution. So yeah, that's kind of what led me to you and to all of this. And I think I've told you this in our sessions, but I was getting like B12 injections, and I'm still on those as well, doing the vitamin D supplements, doing chiropractor appointments, doing acupuncture appointments. Like I was doing all the things. And so it felt like, okay, well, if I can come off the pill and fix some of these things, then that might be the answer.
Well, thank you for taking us through all of that. I do have some questions to go back to, but while we're on this topic, you shared some of the kind of miscellaneous symptoms, kind of non-specific, not in and of themselves so urgent, but together, obviously very problematic. And so you went off the pill, and you also shared then that you were doing a bunch of other stuff as well, but it wasn't really giving you the result you were looking for. So at the time that we're recording this, if my memory serves me correct, you've been off the pill now for probably 4 to 5 months.
Yes. Yeah. So I came off the beginning of May and it's September.
Okay. So then share with us, have you noticed any changes? Did you get the result you were looking for with regards to those symptoms?
Not yet. Not yet. And I'm not discouraged though, because I know just from our class and all of my reading, like it can take a year or so. 6 months to a year, I feel like is the typical, like for your body to really like, I don't know, bounce back is the right word, but recover, I guess, from being on the pill for so long. And I did actually just get blood work done last week. I had kind of been putting that off too, just because like I just said, like it takes a while, but so my B12 levels have come up a little bit. And this has been like, I was trying to figure out before this call, but I think it's been about a year that I've been on every other week injections, and nothing had changed. Like I had gotten my blood work done multiple times and my vitamin B level still wasn't coming up. Because before I even got on the injections, I was taking a supplement, which was a high dose supplement, and that wasn't making a difference. So they're like, okay, let's try the injections. And the injections also like barely brought it up, like a few points or whatever. But now it went from 427 to 508 just within the last 4 months. And that to me seems significant because what I just said, like the past year, even with the injections, it just wasn't budging. It was staying in that like 410 to 420 range. So it's not a huge leap, but it's a leap. Like it
Yeah,
feels
I
good
mean,
to me.
given the history, that's significant. And were there, so when you said you haven't seen much of a change, could you share with us some of the symptoms that have persisted, or if there are any symptoms that you had that have changed a little bit?
I guess persisted would be the low libido. That still hasn't come back yet. And just the fact that I guess I was hoping for like a bigger increase in like the vitamin B and vitamin D, because vitamin D hasn't moved much. It went from like 32, I think, to 36. So a little bit of an improvement, but not much. And what else was I'm trying to think that, I mean, I guess the feeling tired goes with the vitamin B, but just, I don't know. I feel like my energy levels haven't like skyrocketed or anything. And then one symptom that I've actually had that I didn't have on the pill is acne, which I think we talked about recently, but that has been a fun one to deal with after coming off the pill. But I did have acne before I went on the pill in my teens, but was hoping that was a teenage thing and not oh, the pill fixed it thing. But I knew coming off of it that could come back. And hopefully it's not a permanent thing, but just while my hormones are still readjusting, like hopefully it will resolve itself, but we shall see.
Yeah. I mean, you're still within that post-pill recovery slash transition phase. And then you had mentioned yeast infections. Was that something that was more recurrent or just once in a while?
So I feel like the yeast infections have been the biggest question for me in the last few years because I still am having itching, but I technically don't have a yeast infection. So I've been to my gynecologist. They gave me like, and this was right before we started our class as well. They gave me, I think it was 12 weeks of the diflucan pill to take one a week for 12 weeks because it was just a recurring, like, I was constantly itching and it was just like minimal yeast showing up when they would do the swab. They were like, we're just going to throw everything at it and see if it will go away. So I did all the like cream suppository things, and I was doing one of the diflucan pills every now and then. And finally, she was like, all right, let's just do 12 in a row and see what that does. And it didn't do anything. But I literally tried every type of the creams and things that are out there at the drugstore or the prescription, and nothing was making the itching go away. And I finally did the Evie. It's like an at-home test where you can swab yourself and send it off, and it tells you lots of different things, not just if you have yeast or bacteria, but it tells you like the specific bacteria that are present, I guess, in your vaginal microbiome. And it came back. I did the first one, I feel like it was back in like March or April, and it came back that I had 100% good bacteria, that there was nothing wrong. But it did say that a lot of people, like 100% isn't necessarily good, that it might be too much of the good bacteria. And so they said to look into cytolytic vaginosis, which I have Googled and Googled and Googled, and there isn't much out there. There's a few studies. And the one thing that they have found to help this is baking soda baths, like sitz baths, and baking soda, like douches, basically. Like you can put baking soda into like a gel capsule or like a glycerin capsule, I guess, and insert it. And that's the only thing that will kind of help, because the issue is that you have too much of the good bacteria. And so your vagina, I guess, is too acidic. And so it's bringing the acid level down with the baking soda. Or maybe I have it backwards. I don't remember, but it's
Well,
one
so
of
I'll just say on air that for any of my clients, especially who we've had conversations like this, they'll know I never recommend douching under any
right.
circumstances. So we would have to kind of look at different, especially with baking soda, because it's actually the acidity that maintains the acidity of the vagina is something that actually maintains that balance a little bit more. I would imagine, Alayna, that 12 rounds of any type of antibacterial is going to throw off your bacterial flora, right? Because that's like a consistent situation. So, but yeah, I just wanted to put that out there, because there's all kinds of things you can find for how to deal with it. And so we can certainly talk more about that if you like. But where are you at with it now then? Have you found a homeostasis, or are you still struggling with the challenges? So one question, and I don't remember if this had come up in class, do you wash with soap your vulva?
I don't. Yeah. I
Okay.
remember speaking about that in class, and I have stopped since then, and that's been months now. So,
Okay. And
and
before the class, you had been washing with soap.
yes, but not like, I don't know, just a very small amount of soap. And it wasn't like daily. It was kind of random, if that makes sense. But yeah.
Well, and if anyone's listening and wondering why I'm asking these questions, so although I suppose it's controversial to some degree, because individual women, we do things how we do things, and however you do things is how you do them. And we don't talk to our girlfriends about how we wash our vulvas. So if you've always washed with soap, then hearing someone call you out and say, actually, no, that's not how to wash your vagina. It's like, I'm a grown woman. Who do you think you are telling me how to wash my, right? However, with that said, in all the years I've been working with clients, when I have clients who have a regular kind of vaginal irritation, it's much more likely that they do have a history of washing with soap, because washing with soap actually does alter the flora. So I would, and just to kind of put it out there into context, then, Alayna, you had two potential kind of offenders for disrupting that natural flora, one of them being the pill, which for anyone who's listened to several of the either Pill Reality series episodes or the Fam Reality series, you'll have heard this. You'll have heard a few here and there of clients who had this kind of recurring yeast, and then their doctor gives them something for the yeast, and then they get the BB, and the doctor gives them something for the BB. And so the pill is known to disrupt the vaginal flora. And then if you actually wash with soap, whether it's, and of course, I'll just take the liberty here to say whether it's every day or whether it's once in a while, or whether it's it's the special vagina soap that this company sells. Like, it doesn't matter. You're not supposed to, and especially the douching, all of those things disrupt the vaginal flora. So it doesn't mean don't clean yourself, but the inner lips of the vulva require water and some like firm kind of like rubbing, I guess you could say. Like you can use your fingers to really get in there, and you can use soap on the outer parts and obviously in your bum and stuff like that, but not anyway. So that's like PSA over, like public service announcement. And so Alayna, obviously this wasn't for your benefit because you've already heard all of this. This is more just for the listeners and the audience, just in case they're kind of like, why are they talking about this? But what I found over the years is, at least for actually for the majority of my clients, like a lot, when they stop washing with the soap, it doesn't necessarily immediately resolve, but that definitely puts them on the right path. And then in your case, you're probably already doing it, but you will want to consider at bare minimum adding in some probiotic foods as a way of starting to restore. And it could take a little bit of time. And we could talk about a few other options as well off air. But just to kind of put it out there, especially if you're still getting the regular irritation.
Yeah, I think that was my struggle too, though, was like for all the different doctors and people that I had seen about it, like adding probiotics was always like on the list of things to do. But then whenever I got this, like, I guess, diagnosis of cytolytic vaginosis, one of the things that it says is to take out any extra probiotics, because the whole thing is you have too much of the good bacteria, and that's what's causing the issues. So I've kind of taken away all the probiotics that I'm still eating like yogurt and drinking probiotic drinks and things like that. But I was actually like doing like a supplement of probiotic. And so I've paused that once I got that, I guess, diagnosis, like I said. So that's like the frustrating thing. Like,
Yeah.
is it
Well, and
good?
generally what you the ideal is to have a good variety of it. So I think that, yeah, I think that it's worth kind of looking at that, because if you're following what they're saying, I mean, I certainly, like I said, I would be a little bit skeptical of the baking soda recommendation, but if you're doing that program and you're still not getting the results, then I think it would be time to kind of like reevaluate, go back to basics and see if that is helpful as well. And just as a side note, as something that came up in class as well, anecdotally, some women find that if they do vaginal steaming before their period is coming, if they're not actively trying to conceive. So again, anecdotally, for anyone who wants to jump on, the vaginal steaming is not scientific train. However, there is that evidence, that anecdotal evidence from like case study evidence and different clients of mine as well, that vaginal steaming can help with bacterial vaginosis and things like that. So obviously that wouldn't be the only strategy, but it's something that you could consider alongside what you've already done, which is not washing with soap, and then adding in probiotics. If you're comfortable trying that for a period of time, you could always try it for a period of time and then check it, start at the beginning of a cycle and do that for a cycle or two and see what happens. And then also you could try adding that in have you been doing that?
Have I been doing what? Sorry.
The steaming?
No, I have not. I am open to it. I just hadn't, because like you said, it's mainly, I feel like, geared toward bacterial vaginosis. And since I don't feel like that's my issue, I just haven't tried it yet.
As a women's health professional, you already know the value of tracking the menstrual cycle, but I'm guessing that you're not comfortable interpreting complex charts, weird mucus patterns, abnormal bleeding, or other similar situations. You're passionate about fertility awareness and want to use it in your practice, but you're just not sure where to start. That's where FAM comes in. The next class of FAM is just around the corner. Registration is now open for the Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. Classes start on October 4th. By the time you finish your FAM certification, you'll have the skills to confidently teach fertility awareness to your clients, interpret all kinds of complex charting scenarios, and you'll have the step-by-step protocols you need to help your clients improve their hormone and menstrual cycle health. Apply today at fertilityfriday.com/famlive. And when you apply, we'll send you the details to join one of our upcoming information sessions. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/famlive. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. Well, and you could think of it in terms of like dispatch, because if you think about that, it's an interesting thing, right? Where when you have yeast, when you knock out all the yeast, you get this. So there's supposed to be a little community in there. Not all good, not all bad, right? Obviously. But there's also supposed to be this community, a balance of bacteria and yeast. And so when you attack the one a lot, the other one ends up overgrown. So
yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely open
Yes.
to it.
Well, yeah, and to go back to, there was one thing or one or two things that I wanted to go back to. We definitely took like a itchy vag detour
Gotcha.
here. But one of the things I wanted to go back to that I thought was, there's a couple things I thought that were interesting. One of the things in your story was that you were first put on the pill because of your cramping. And then even though you were on the pill, you were still experiencing those period cramps. And so I'm curious if you were to rate your pain before the pill, 0 out of 10, and then while on the pill, 0 out of 10. I'm just curious to how you would note those.
Gosh, it's been so long.
Well, we
I,
won't hold you to it.
I mean, I just remember it being awful. Like before I went on the pill, like it was, my mom was just giving me all the ibuprofen, a heating pad. Like I remember having to stay home from school because it was so bad. Or like having to stay home from softball practice or cheer practice or whatever, sport it was that I was doing. And then I went on the pill and there was some improvement. I don't know if I could put a number to it, but it was a small improvement. It wasn't like oh, great, it's better. I remember still having to take ibuprofen, but I wasn't like having to stay home from things. Like I could
I feel
still,
like that's helpful because
yeah,
it puts it into perspective. So it wasn't enough so that you didn't have to take any painkillers, but it did kind of reduce the overall. And I feel like that is significant. And like if you think about it, right? I mean, to have pain so severe that you need to take something and then to be on the pill and to still have to take something, I mean, that's a pretty significant sign. So you mentioned, just to kind of recap, then that you were on the pill and then you were still experiencing pain with your pill periods, your withdrawal bleeds, enough so that you went back to the doctor to
mm-hmm.
ask about that. So I feel like that's significant as well, because sometimes when we tell our stories, it's always like, it was bad enough that you called the doctor, put on your clothes, and went to your appointment, right, to ask about it. And then the doctor's response was, oh, we'll just have less periods. This is just something, and of course, that's how our medical system addresses it. But I find that to be interesting as well, because at no point in your story did anyone ever say, well, that it sounds like your pain is pretty significant. We should potentially investigate you further. And I feel like this is very, very consistent. So I'm just calling that out
Yeah,
because I know I've been talking on the podcast here and there about endometriosis. And in the book I'm working on, we have a whole section on that. So, more on that to come, but it's on my radar. But I find that to be just an interesting part of your story. And then to add to that, you also shared that when you started taking the pill more continuously, that you started to then experience pain outside of that. So even though now you're not having these withdrawal bleeds, you're experiencing random pain at various times. Those are potentially signs of something like endo. And so now that you're on the other side of this, I think the obvious question is, are you still having pain? How are you managing that? And then the other question to add to that is, have you thought about what the significance of your symptoms were, even though you were on the pill at that time?
yeah. I feel like a lot of it likely had to do with my diet growing up. In the past, probably 2 years or so, I've really jumped down the rabbit hole of healthy eating and whole food diets. And I was vegan for a hot minute, like kind of really gotten into eating better. But that just was not on my radar growing up. Like, I feel like my diet was just a lot of fast food, a lot of sugar. Like I'm still very much addicted to sugar and trying to cut down is so hard, but like I feel like that likely had a lot to do with it because in the past, like I said, probably about 2 years or so from cleaning up my diet, anytime I have had a period or a withdrawal bleed, I guess, it has not been nearly what I remember the cramps and issues being. And even just that it's maybe less time frame that it's bad. Like it's usually just like one day of my period that's like the heaviest bleeding. That's when I'll probably have the cramps. But then the rest of the few days, like it's totally fine. And so I guess the diet is like the biggest change that I can think of because it was even before I came off the pill that this change happened to where it wasn't, they just weren't as bad. And when I was on the pill, the withdrawal bleeds that I was having started being a lot lighter as well. Like I just wasn't bleeding as much. Like they seemed so much easier than I remember them being in the past. Not sure what that's related to, if that has anything to do with diet, but since coming off the pill, it is a lot of a heavier bleed as well. So that's an interesting difference, I feel like. So I guess the biggest link that I can think of is diet, but I'm not struggling anymore, like with just the awful cramps to where I feel like I can't go out and do anything. I mean, I've even maybe taken ibuprofen like once, during each period. It's not like all day I'm like constantly trying to get relief. So yeah, I do feel like that's been an improvement.
That's so interesting, Alayna. I feel like, I mean, everyone's experience is not the same, of course. So obviously that's a big concern for anyone who was taking the pill for pain reduction. And I find this conversation to always be complex because, of course, there are also a lot of women who do take the pill for pain reduction, but they don't get that big of a reduction in their pain, right? So, and your comment about diet is very interesting as well. And of course, it makes me think because I've been pondering these things for a while. But you were put on the pill for this reason, and then the pill didn't even fix the problem. It just lessened it a bit. And then what ended up fixing the problem was the kind of change in diet and the rabbit hole, right? And and so that, yeah, I just find that to be an interesting point. But the bigger point is that we're happy that you're not experiencing that pain. That must have, I would imagine that that would have been one of your concerns, obviously, coming off of the pill, if you're going to have to deal with this pain again. So that's really good news.
Yeah,
And it also gives hope to anyone who's in a similar situation. And you mentioned one thing I want to point out as well, that you did change the dietary patterns before coming off. And that's a really good recommendation for anyone who did have pain and are quite concerned about going back to that, to really start making those dietary changes and cleaning things up, reducing inflammatory foods, reducing the sugar, right? All the things before. And I would say 3 to 6 months if you have the three. I mean, 6 is pushing it. Sometimes you just got to come off the pill when you're ready. But 3 months is a good number for doing that. And then another question I wanted to ask you as we kind of start bringing things to a close, tell us about your experience then with charting. At this stage, you are not actively trying to conceive. So tell us then about what that was like, because obviously, for all of the things that we spoke about, your experience on the pill, although obviously toward the end of your journey, these things started popping up. From what you described, it wasn't, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, it wasn't negative. It sounds like your experience on the pill is fairly positive. You didn't have side effects that were significant enough to be disrupting your life. You were happy, fairly consistent with it for 16 years. Wasn't broke. We didn't fix it, right? And then we switched to this other method. So share with us what that has been like, because that actually might have been a question in some of the listeners' minds, thinking, okay, well, did she come off to have a baby? What's going on there?
right. Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's been the first like 2 months or so, I feel like were a little bit frustrating just because it was boring. Like there we're going through the class and we're learning all the different things about the different types of cervical mucus you're going to see and the different patterns that to look for. And my chart was just like cervical mucus wise was just dry, like I just wasn't having anything. And it was like, okay, when am I actually going to be able to put all these new things I've learned into action? And I'm still sort of at that place, but I have seen, 1 or 2 days of cervical mucus. So at least I know, like, okay, my body is recovering. Like I really think that we'll get there to that somewhat normal-ish point. But so yeah, I mean the first few months, because I don't even remember what my cycle was, like 90 some days, I think, was that first cycle off the pill. And that just, even though I expected it from all the reading and the podcasts that I've listened to, it was still just a little bit like, oh, dang, like I was hoping I would just come off of it and everything would be great. And I would just start having like this beautiful chart. And that just wasn't the case. But I think I had that one really long cycle. Then I had more of a normal, like 32-day cycle after that. And that really helped to like boost my confidence. Still not really much cervical mucus at all, but you could really see the temperatures change, which was satisfying. It still wasn't far, it was far from the perfect chart, but it's still, it's getting more normal, I guess, as we go. And yeah, I mean, getting into the routine of taking temperatures, I feel like was pretty easy, especially because like I am doing this as a form of birth control. So I just really wanted to be as sure as possible, even though, you know, at this point we're still like using protection and all of that because I'm not 100% confident in the charting yet, just because of the lack of mucus. But yeah, so I mean it's been a journey and it's still going because I'm on my, I guess, third chart now. So I'm excited just to keep seeing where it goes and hopefully continue to just see more and more signs that make me feel more and more confident with this method. Yeah, did that answer the question?
Oh, it did. And thank you for sharing all of that with us. I feel like it's really useful. This is obviously why I like having the podcast and allowing all of the women who have participated in this body of work to share their experience in their own words. Even though you can read about what is typical coming off the pill, your experience, though very inconvenient
Right.
and highly frustrating,
Yeah.
is quite typical. It's quite common. And what I mean by that, what in particular is common about it, is that there is a percentage of women who come off of the pill and see no mucus for the first few cycles.
Right.
And rest assured, it's not everybody. So if you're listening, it doesn't mean this is what everybody experiences, but certainly a percentage. And what I've noticed is, although the majority of my clients will see some mucus, it's never perfect or optimal. And especially when you have that long-term use, whether that's 5 years, 10 years, or 16 years. And again, Alayna, 16 years is not, I've had clients there was one client who used it for 30. So yeah, her entire adult life. So yes, it's just to put it out there, right? So you're still not even, it can feel like a lot and you can feel like a unicorn, but you're not. So the challenge, there's always pros and cons to everything. So I think the positive is that in your case, although it did take the 90 days, I believe that first cycle was 91 days. The positive is that you did ovulate again. You did know what was going on. And in the class, although you didn't have the personal experience of seeing all of the different mucus types, we were in the class with 10 of or 11 of our closest girlfriends, right? So we were able to see the patterns from others. And once you do start to see it, you will be more than prepared. So that's a positive. Of course, the negative is that it just feels like it's just taking forever and nothing's happening.
Yeah, and whenever that did, like in that first cycle, there was one day of mucus. And when that happened, it was like, oh wow, this is what it is. Like I knew exactly what it was. I knew what to expect. Like, and it made me excited, you know, and without this class, like I would have never been on that, that wavelength, I guess. But yeah,
Well,
so
yeah, because then somewhere in the middle you could see like, oh, my ovaries are working. This is
right,
great.
exactly. Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm not broken. It didn't break me. But yeah.
Well, and when you're at the beginning of the journey, it's always a little bit tricky for someone like myself. I look at things differently because I look at things over the time frame in my mind. I'm always thinking about that. And although it feels right now, because you're still in the middle of it, right? You're on cycle 3.
Right.
So although it feels cycle 3 and it's September, and as you mentioned, you came off of birth control in May. But with that said, once you get to cycle 6 and once you get to cycle 8 and once we get to the year mark, things do tend to resolve. And the important thing to remember is that the post-pill transition phase is temporary. And the way we look at it in the program is that when you're in that first 6 to 12 months, then a lot of what we're seeing can often be attributed directly to the pill and just those post results. And then once we get past that first 12 months or so, then we still could attribute some of it to the pill, but then we have to start not attributing all of it. And even sometimes before that. And this is because there are women who come off the pill and then they start ovulating 14 days after. Again, it's a percentage. It's not most, it's not all. And then a lot of women start, they get their first period back within that first month or two. And then it's the smaller and smaller percentages. So I feel like that also helps for anyone who's listening to know it's not just that everyone who comes off just never gets their period again. Like, it's not like that. A lot of women do get their period a little bit sooner. And then, yeah. But in your case, the 90 days is still within what's typical. So I don't know if any of that is helpful, but I just try to give that reassurance when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah, and it was helpful because you were giving me that reassurance throughout the class as well. And like seeing other people in the class who had come off months or even a year or two before, like, and hearing like, oh yeah, that's normal, that's typical, that's what I had to deal with too. Like, it definitely made me feel better. And even just listening like to your previous podcast and hearing other people talk about it, like it was comforting. And that's why, even though it was a little bit frustrating, like, it wasn't super frustrating and it wasn't worrying me because I knew like this is the case for so many people.
Well, and also given the situation, and by this point you had made up your mind that you were going to come off of it. And so I would argue that you were then committed to doing what you need to do until you feel comfortable with this method as a primary birth control. Maybe share a little bit about what that was like. Often it's very common to then be afraid of getting pregnant unexpectedly. You did not.
Right.
Even though you didn't have this perfect chart. And maybe just share with us your thoughts around that if you want to, and even maybe how your partner reacted, because that's a common question I think people have.
Yeah. Well, my partner is great, first of all, and he is always he's seen all the things I was dealing with having to get the injections and just the exhaustion and the infections and all the things, like, and he was like, if this is something you think can help with any of these issues, like, I'm on board 100%. So whatever we need to do, like, we'll do it. And me constantly telling him it's just temporary. We're only going to have to use condoms temporarily. Like, that I think helped to make him feel better as well. And he knows that like when I do things, like, I'm all in on things. So like I was doing all the research and like really making sure we did this correctly, I guess, as well as we could. So he wasn't really worried about me getting pregnant. And we've just always been taught, condoms are as effective as it gets. So we really weren't worried about that. And yeah, did that answer? Is there something else I missed? Sorry, I got distracted.
No, that answers. That answers for sure. Well, and as we start wrapping up today, usual last questions that I ask for anyone who is thinking about jumping off of contraceptives and is maybe nervous, either because of the pain issue or because of any number of issues, the fear of conceiving if you're not ready to start trying. What, if anything, would you want them to know?
I feel like if you're having issues, on the pill, it's so worth it to come off of it and just have that, just keep telling yourself that it is a temporary thing where you will feel confident. Like, I'm slowly getting there, and through the class, like, I feel so prepared, like, for whenever my body gets back to its normal and I'm able to like really see my chart, like, I know that I'll feel comfortable enough to start having unprotected sex again. And just like I said, with hearing everybody else's like stories as we're going through the class, like, it was just so helpful. And you could see, like, I know some of the classes you would get excited because you would see people were having like unprotected sex on their chart, and it's like, oh, like, you're confident in this. And it really does, it happens. And it's the research, it's the constantly meeting with the class, it's listening to the podcast, like, I think it's a whole slew of things that will just really help you become more confident with it. But I truly don't think I would have gotten there without the class, just because of that accountability and like showing up every week and just really feeling like committed to this, and hearing all the other girls' stories as well. And it's a process, so you just have to be prepared to, like I said, temporarily use protection of some sort, and just know that they're eventually, after however many cycles it takes, like, you will get more comfortable with it. And it's a method that I feel like now, like, through this class, I know people are using it and it's working. and yeah, it's possible, especially if you're just not one, if there's an issue. Like, I feel like my issues were somewhat minor on the pill. So if it's a big issue, I just feel like it's so worth it to come off of it and see, like, can this help and can this work? I mean, the worst thing that I feel like I kept telling myself, the worst thing that can happen is I'll just go back on the pill if this really doesn't work for me. So yeah.
Well, I love that advice. I feel like it's all very balanced and makes sense. And sometimes I think we can make something into a really big deal in our
Right.
minds when really you've been dealing with whatever you've been dealing with for this long, you've managed. And so you can try something new. And like you said, if it doesn't work, there's always plan B. I mean,
Yeah.
hopefully we don't need plan B, but
Right.
it's still there if we do. So it's totally fine. Well, Alayna, this has been just a really, really nice conversation, a really nice opportunity for us to connect again. I've really enjoyed I feel like we went into a lot of different directions, and I feel like I'm really excited to share today's episode. Do you have any last thoughts or anything you want to share with the audience?
I don't think so, but just want to thank you for everything, for this and the class and all your podcasts and all the information that you put out into the world. It's definitely helped me, and I'm sure it's helping lots and lots of people. So I appreciate you and all the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/490. I hope that you enjoyed today's interview with Alayna. It was nice to have her on the show, and I felt like we touched on so many different important points. So it was really nice to have the opportunity to chat about her experience on the pill and coming off the pill. And I think it's a really good example of, okay, so she came off the pill. She did not have her first period immediately afterwards. Her cervical mucus patterns were a bit atypical compared to the normal parameters, but fairly typical for women who are coming off of contraception. And even in the face of those challenges, she was able to jump right into cycle charting and to really internalize the rules and to understand how it all works, to understand how to chart her mucus, her temperature. And within the context of the program, we are able to chart in any circumstance. And I think that's a really important takeaway as well. You don't need a perfect cycle to chart. You don't need for everything to just be just so. It doesn't have to be like the textbook. The whole point of taking a class and learning how to chart your cycles is to be able to chart in any circumstance. And of course, it's a little bit easier. It's always a little bit easier if you're just like a robot and everything's perfect. So it adds a bit of a layer of complexity, but rest assured that regardless of whether your cycles are regular or irregular, whether you have normal mucus patterns or abnormal, whether your temperature is normal or whether it fluctuates, or whether you have challenges taking the daily temperature or you need to consider a different temperature taking option to account for that. Whatever the scenario is, I've seen clients in all scenarios and we're able to chart under any circumstances. And so the takeaway is that you do not need perfect cycles to chart, and we have plenty of options. So if one of your signs isn't as strong for a period of time, so it's very, very common for women to come off the pill and the cervical mucus sign isn't as strong for the first several months while their body normalizes, we have several other measures and other ways to make sure that we're able to chart effectively for birth control, even when one of those signs isn't as strong for a period of time. And while we're doing that, we also have ways to support whether it's mucus production or encourage the other signs to normalize so that we do get to the place where charting does become a little bit simpler. Just as you get healthier, your cycle is going to, more easily fall into those normal parameters. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I hope you have a wonderful weekend whenever you're tuning into the show. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting. And that's a wrap. If you're loving the FAM Practitioner series, then I know you'll love our Fertility Awareness Mastery Mentorship Program. It's a 9-month immersive experience that will completely transform the way you work with clients, allowing you to not only teach fertility awareness to your clients, but to use the menstrual cycle as a vital sign and diagnostic tool in your women's health practice. Our next class starts on October 4th, so there's still time to reserve your spot. Apply now at fertilityfriday.com/famlive, and when you apply, you'll have the opportunity to join one of our upcoming information sessions for additional details. There are no other programs like this offered anywhere. Transform your practice in 9 months. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/famlive to apply now. That's fertilityfriday.com/FAMMLIVE.